So with that, I think again, you have the links, you'll get the links to the actual materials, and I encourage you to browse them, and if you like them, share them with others. And I'll stop sharing my screen, and we'll be able to kind of have a conversation and some kind of questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Dr. Weiss. I appreciate all your knowledge and the degree to which this guide is comprehensive, and you've summarized really well the goals. Most of my questions have to do with next steps in the delivery of this guide to the audiences for whom it was intended. And I think the first group is that, so I think if we go through them, some of the questions in the chat refer to this question of access to autism-informed mental health practitioners. So maybe so first of all, we appreciate the comprehensiveness of the guides, that it acknowledges the two-way street, that it is a matter of society and a reduction of stigma, as well as the individual on the spectrum, and also that the context, one's individual experiences, and one's all of those play a role in one's mental health. We like the positiveness of the approach, and that it regards mental health as a spectrum, and that varies depending on context, circumstances, and individuals. And we're very happy to hear the voices and stories of the autistic advisors. But the audience for the guide, it was stated as being autistic adults, family members, professionals, policymakers, and leaders, and I would include another group, employers. So if we were to look at each of these groups individually, so reaching mental health practitioners, our experience in BC is probably quite typical in that there are long waiting lists to see mental health practitioners who are autism informed, and the cost for mental health counseling is prohibited. So we as support organizations are in the discouraging position often of fielding requests from people in crisis who want referrals for too few practitioners with wait lists years long. So what we want are more autism-informed mental health practitioners. And I'm wondering, are you considering working with or developing presentations, seminars, workshops based on this guide for mental health practitioners to increase the autism awareness to that population and to increase their comfort with taking on autistic clients?
Joette, that was really a fantastic summary, and I'm nodding emphatically because that's a message that I hear, whether I'm talking to somebody in BC or somebody in Newfoundland. This kind of notion of exactly what you summarized in terms of access to autism-informed mental health supports across different. It's not any one. We're not calling out any one profession per se, but it really is this challenge with exactly what you said. So to answer your question, there's a few, I think, next steps that are needed here. And I don't know if I'm the one to do all of these next steps, just like I wasn't the one to develop the guide by myself. But certainly one key aspect is to say, now that we have this fundamental information, mental health literacy 101, how do we need to translate this for specific audiences, right? To ensure that what the message we're saying is being done in a way, both in terms of the language level, but also in terms of the how in depth it is, and is it supposed to be all in writing and so on, but is it done in the way that the audience is going to be most receptive to hearing the messages that are in the guide? We're not changing the messages, but it's kind of the transmission has to be really well thought out. And so I think it would require, the best way to do that is to undertake another process of co-production with people from those audiences who are in the know. So finding those autism-informed professionals, service providers in the mental health space who can help to take this as a starting point and translate it for their peers, and then make that freely accessible to them, and they can become the champions of pushing it out. Right. And so I think embedding it within those groups and finding the champions is really important. What we're doing here, I'll say, just to say, Joette, in Ontario, is I'm working with, it's not particularly related to this guide, it's a different, but it gives you an example of that. I'm working with Children's Mental Health Ontario, a major organization, not in the autism space per se, but that is all about championing children's mental health and mental health services for kids and teens. And we've undertaken a project. I'm partnering with them on a project to identify what do mental health clinicians need to know when they're supporting autistic clients who have mental health problems with their mental health problems. So while, yeah.
Sorry, exactly. Even as you stated, one of the requirements was to be heard, and that is not a given. We received a question in advance of this talk about medications, and this person was describing a situation where they felt they weren't consulted in medications that they're taking. I mean, that's so fundamental, and that should not be part of the practice. It tells you where the level of awareness is now, or lacking, the lack of awareness. So I hear what you're saying, and I would look forward to those opportunities for us to look for interested medical health practitioners to pair up with the guide and look for that next step strategy. The next question I have is about taking this to the next level for individuals. But in keeping with that, Rhoda sent in a link in the chat about park presentations, and I'm wondering if she might want to. This was about positive strategies, and people were talking about prescriptions for being happy, or prescriptions for fun, and so anyone who would like to jump in on that about their experiences. And Rhoda, if you feel like talking about your park presentation link and letting us know what that's about, please let us know. Anyone have any pressing questions right now?
Yeah, there were two questions that came up in that chat box as well, that said, at this point, if an autistic adult wanted therapy for anxiety or depression specifically, Jonathan, do you think that it would be more important to look for a therapist who excels in helping with anxiety or depression, or finding a therapist who specializes in helping autistic clients? Do you have any insight from the advisors on that?
I think I don't want to put myself in their shoes. I like to be their voice and say this is exactly what they would all say. But my learning is that if somebody is working with a provider who is not autism informed, there's a risk that that person could do more harm, or at very least create a situation where, while they have good information about that issue, they're not able to transmit it in a way that's going to be useful. So I think it's really important that they're able to find somebody who is informed about autism, and more than that, also be able to see the person for who the person is, and doesn't stereotype what they would expect about autism. So there has to be flexibility and patience. So I think that an autism provider, a lot of what people need are not necessarily about specific mental health things that only a mental health practitioner can provide. So I would start there.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, it's Rhoda. I just wanted to let you know that what you were asking about is called a Parks prescription. And there's a doctor that got it approved by Health Canada that you can get a prescription basically to go out in nature for 4 more hours a week or whatever you think you need. So I actually got my healthcare practitioner to prescribe me that.
That's very intriguing.
Cool. Yeah. That's cool.
It is.
That's great.
Other
I love it.
other people were mentioning things like running or those self-help strategies that are so important, but sometimes we forget about. So the next audience group is the individuals themselves, the ASD individuals. And so we are interested in tools for exploring and understanding oneself and for practicing mental health strategies as preventative action against mental health problems, but also to live one's best and happiest self. And so some of the things, like the videos themselves, are almost there as sort of a self-help guide, but not quite. And so I feel that there needs to be a little bit more, a next step there too, a means to explore that a little further. And you mentioned the Know Your Normal toolkits, and perhaps Brock can add those in that link in to the chat as well. And the idea of a stress quiz for understanding your stress levels. And so something along that line. And I'm wondering if you've worked with groups, or if you have any sense that it would be of value to take various sections of the guides and to have discussion groups around that, or what you're feeling about discussion groups for people on the spectrum.
I think that having, there's two parts to that. One, I think you could easily pick out from this guide key things that you would want to assemble into your top 10 self-help activities, for example, and compile that together and have, okay, try these things. Here's our, because here's a quick hit of a whole bunch of different things with the purpose of promoting positive mental health, and just leave it at that, right? And say that that's useful for that. You could have a similar one around dealing with crises on the other end of things, it's more focused and it only has to do with links and parts that are relevant to that. So I think that's an excellent next step. In terms of groups, it's clear that being able to connect with like-minded peers is a key aspect to wellness. And so I think that one of the unforeseen outcomes of this, Joette, was that many of the advisors got a lot out of connecting with each other in talking about what they liked and didn't like about the guide, that the benefit for them wasn't just about working on the guide, but was about the connection, about the material. So being able to talk about these things with other people, share with each other incidentally, but having some structure to that, I think, is also very useful, rather than having it just be open-ended. So having peer connections where there's a specific topic that's going to be talked about, but that we're not rigidly holding to that. I think that's the kind of useful, and that people can feel comfortable with their videos on, off, that it could be, they can engage in person or online or through chat. I think that creating those varied ways of connecting is really important.
Would you ever think of doing online sessions like based on various sections similar to what you've just described?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about doing that as the next step myself. Again, so we kind of finished this part, and our next step are more about the next kind of written materials that we would do, rather than the next kind of groups that we're going to run. So we're looking more about the materials that were last on their own that other people can pick up and run with. So ultimately, I want to encourage people to pull parts of this that they think are useful and to translate it for different audiences, or to use it in their own groups, right? And those things. So that's how I kind of see my next step.
Okay. Brock, can you see Carla's question? Do you want to? Carla was looking for, I mean, with sort of discussion groups, I was thinking more in a macro sense. And Carla had a question here about a more global, a more, sorry, I was looking at the micro, she's looking more at the macro. She says, these people, okay, well, hang on. I'm losing track anyway. It's about a more global approach of increasing awareness to policymakers and to change policy and procedure. So again, it's a question about how do you get not only to medical practitioners, but how do you bring that awareness that's so rich in the guide to practical application or to broader awareness of audiences that may be hard to reach.
So I think I think focused awareness campaigns are really important when it comes to trying to influence policy. Giving them a 200-page guide is not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be very focused in terms of the key messages, and it has to come from the people, right? It has to come from many people to influence policy. So there has to be a strategy in place where people come together and have that shared voice that's amplified by organizations like your organization and AutismBC that can amplify people's voices. So that's the way to get influence policy. But there could be materials in here that are useful. You mentioned before educators, for example. You know, again, I think there are pieces around what is autism. You know, that wasn't in original mental health literacy materials, but a lot of what I've learned from this is that a place that needs to start if we're going to address mental health challenges for autistic people is to educate policymakers and educators that might at one point engage with or are making decisions about autistic people, to educate them about what autism really is and how to appreciate autistic differences for what they are, right? So like it's not actually about teaching them about what depression looks like. That's not the place to start. It really is about changing people's perspectives about autism and how they can, what they need to do to support autistic people and what they shouldn't do as well.
Right, and the other user group that I was, our audience that I think this needs to be brought to were employers. And because employment, as we all know, is so fundamental to self-esteem, independence, and personal growth and success. And so some of the items that are highlighted are not only first of all, universal design, but accommodations not only for physical and sensory accessibility, but also cognitive and social accessibility. And there are very specific examples: schedule set out in advance, plain language directives, space and time breaks, options for requesting accommodations, alternative to standard interviews, all of those things, again, that need to be more generally understood amongst employers. And so again, the question is next steps. Are you thinking about bringing this, or are you reaching out to employers, to boards of trade, we have an organization here called the President's Group that reaches out to employers. But again, to take the guide and bring some of these things forward to this group.
Well, I haven't targeted that. It's great. You're so right to raise that as kind of an aspect of universal design and the message that a rising tide lifts all boats. And that, you know, for employers, it's not just about being autism friendly, but about being, or autism aware, but it's about ensuring that they have equitable access and supports that are in place so people can, you know, be valued members within their organizations more broadly. So I'm not planning, my immediate plans aren't to focus on employers. No, but I would be happy to engage with people who are and support them in the process.
Okay, we may come knocking on your door yet again. The final user group that is the community. And again, I am totally appreciative of the two-way street aspect of this, and that it's about the changes that need to be made within community. And there are, again, simple strategies: offer reassurance, be patient, accepting difference as normal, those kinds of things. And you talk about some things in the guide, and again, maybe Brock can include these, about pods and pod mapping and other community approaches for inclusion. And I'm wondering if you might want to say something about that.
What I'll say is that wasn't something that I brought forward at all I want to be honest, and in writing this together, it was the autistic community that, so the link, some people just sent a whole bunch. I just saw Brock just put in some links about pods in the chat. It was actually joy. It was new to me in this, and it was our advisors that were saying, you are missing a key aspect of this, of finding those more local level kind of groups that we can identify and connections that we can identify and give to and support, because when I'm going to be in need, I'll be supported in that time. So creating those, it's such a great idea.
So do you see any way that organizations like ours can facilitate that? Can
the only way I think these things can work is if we have local level and regional level focused activities that are bringing people together. I don't think it's something that will work if it's coming from like a national level. I think it has to be grassroots, and it works best when it's grassroots and it's embedded within the actual communities. Yeah, so something like the Square Peg Society and others who can get to the communities and are a part of them already, rather than parachuting in or trying to transplant something that's working somewhere else. I think that's the way to go.
And if you weren't invited into those spaces, there's a very low upkeep of like, oh, I'm coming to show you these things. So knowing your community contacts is like very, very important to be able to connect to.
Any further questions?
I think I saw a hand go up at one point, but maybe not.
Carla, your hand came up and then down.
It just goes back to having these engagements. Like I'm involved with the patient Weiss network through health. So it involves all the health authorities throughout the province, all of the policymakers through Ministry of Health. And I was in a meeting all day yesterday, a workshop trying to make changes to how First Nation Indigenous people can provide complaints. It's coming out of the In Plain Sight document. There's huge discrepancies in support for First Nation people, the different complaint process. So within that, we had people from MOH, we had people from all health authorities, we had people from the colleges, we had people from the accredited organizations, we had everyone there that was necessary to be there, including the coroner's office. And it was very helpful having that engagement and the communication, breaking into small groups, having these discussions, sharing the information. And it was transformative, simple and plain. They're going away. They're making policy changes. It's necessary to move forward. And we all acknowledge the systems are broken. And my frustration here is I'm 57 years old. I have both on the spectrum as well as bipolar. And I have a 32-year-old daughter with bipolar and autism diagnosed, and then a 28-year-old daughter with both bipolar and autism, as well as two grandsons, 5 and 6, diagnosed with autism and a couple other things. So I have to work within these systems, and I can't necessarily I don't have the funds, I'm low income. So I can't go and hire a psychologist. I have to work within the systems such as adult mental health or children's and youth mental health to get the supports that I'm needing. Luckily, my grandsons have the autism funding that we can hire counselors through the FU funding, but that's at risk as well. So I guess my frustration here is we need to increase the knowledge for the people within these systems that are providing support. And there is a severe lack of understanding for the people within the systems. It's pillared. Everything is pillared. So you have adult mental health that doesn't want to deal with developmental disabilities and autism. So they pass it over to CLBC. And my daughter doesn't qualify. Neither one qualify for CLBC because my oldest daughter has severe adaptive functioning, but extremely intelligent. So
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Carla, I just want to say that you're over in BC, I think, and I'm here in Ontario, and I hear the same thing from people. Different ministries and different names, but you're not alone in what, like, the theme of what you're talking about here. The big picture, the highest, like, and if that doesn't change, or the question is like, how could somebody take material that's in this guide and influence it in a way that you talked about with the First Nation community policies, right? Like, how could this be used to change their hearts and minds?
engage,
the materials in here, so that other people don't have to retell the same stories over and over and over again.
correct.
Right? If they're in here, can you pull from this? Can other people pull from this when I don't know who to phone in BC, right? But can people pull from this and actually get them to read pieces of this together, and influence them in that way? Use this as the starting point for those conversations.
In Ministry of Health, you have the Patient Voice Network. You already have channels that can engage those policymakers, can engage the communities that are necessary, the stakeholders. So
Yeah.
is there a way of including that?
And AutismBC has a large network. Like, we have more than 11,000 contacts across British Columbia. So I was very happy when Jonathan said that he would come and help explain this guide and how we can pass it on. I think there's a lot that we can do to share with our network, to share with our community contexts that are able to build out and share to other policy and decision makers. So I know that there were a lot of other questions. We'll try to follow up with people, but it is at 12 o'clock, so we are out of time for a lot of our questions right now. So again, I wanted to thank you for being able to come and share this. I will follow up with everyone with the link to the guide and some of the resources that we have talked about. The next upcoming AutismBC talk is happening February the 15th. It's about the disability tax credit and RDSPs with Disability Alliance BC, because it's coming into tax season. You can keep a look at the AutismBC/events for other upcoming presentations. Thank you all for taking the time to come today. Please take a look at the guide, and thank you so much, Joette, for all of your work to organize and bring this together.
Thanks. I'd like to add one more thing too, that both of us will post this. This meeting has been recorded and it'll get posted. So that's, again, a further way of disseminating this information. So it'll be on both of our websites. And then I also wanted to say that our next meeting is with Square Peg Society is in February 18th, and it's on the representation of autism in film, TV, and media. And so it explores this whole idea of how we're seen. And that's, again, to further break down stigma. So everyone's welcome to attend that meeting. We look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much, Dr. Weiss, for your presentation today and for this comprehensive guide.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. This was wonderful. Have a great weekend, everyone.
You too. Bye-bye.